Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to announce something special with this video. Today's video is going to be the first in a multi-part series, or continuous series, documenting my adventures with propagating orchids from seed. For those of you who are more familiar with this process, propagating orchids from seed, also known as flasking, can be quite a daunting task. And my goal for this series is to do everything in a way that it can be accessible for anyone. So won't require too much special equipment, and if there is something special required, it can probably be DIY'd. And so yeah, I just want to make that announcement first off. And so in today's video, I'm going to show you how to pollinate some orchids. You see here I have some Masdevallia decumanas in bloom. And so I'm going to show you how we can get from this flower into something along the lines of this, which is a seed capsule or seed pod. You'll hear many different names for this thing. So first, let's show you who the parents of this next generation of orchids is going to be. Okay, so I've already mentioned these are Masdevallia decumana. This is all one plant. Got another plant here. But my problem is these two plants are siblings. And so, where possible, I think it's always best to pollinate with a plant that is like the least related. And the reasoning for that is to make sure you don't have effects of inbreeding from breeding things that are too closely related with each other. And so, yeah, so there's selfing, which you can self-pollinate a plant with, and that's typically the least desirable. Then you have sibling crosses, which are also less desirable, but I mean better than selfing. And then you have something called an outcross, which is crossing with something that is more distantly related than a sibling. And sibling is basically something that comes from the same seed pod. And I guess if you recreate a seed pod multiple times, the plants coming from the same two parents would also be considered siblings. But anyways, so I'm very lucky that I have actually a non-related Masdevallia decumana in bloom. And you can see this flower is actually a lot smaller. I don't know if you can tell. This one is from Equigenera. This one here is line bred from a breeder, but you can see the difference that humans can make just from a few generations of flowers. A lot bigger, a lot fatter, a lot more intense color. Yeah, and so the assumption, if I cross this to that, is that you'll get something in the realm of an intermediate between this flower and that flower. I'm not sure if that's true, but I guess we'll find out in this series. And so you see I have two flowers on this plant, so I'll set two pods on this plant, and I'll take one pollen from this flower, put it on one of these flowers, and then I'll take pollen from this flower and put it on this flower, maybe in a day or two when it's more open. And I'll take pollen from one of these flowers and put it on this flower today. That's what I'll show you. And then again, once this opens for a few days and this is fully open, I'll take pollen from this plant and put it onto here. And so let me just show you how I go about pollinating. So I thought I'd just say a few words about flower anatomy / morphology before I go about pollinating, just so we're on the same page for what structures I'm referring to. So all orchids typically have 3 sepals and 3 petals. So sepals are sort of the outer flower parts that encase the flower in the bud before it opens. So you can see here, this one's not open yet. Those 3, so what we are seeing here are sepals. And so once it opens, you can tell that this is a sepal, this is a sepal, and this is a sepal. For Masdevallias, and a lot of pleurothalids in general, the petals tend to be really, really small. So I'm just going to zoom in here, try to zoom in as close as I can, and I'll try to point out the petals. Okay, so as I said, there will be 3 sepals, and there will also be 3 petals. And so on this specific plant, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but that is a petal right there. You see it wiggling? This other one on the other side is a petal. And this one in the middle here is another, I'm trying to wiggle it, is another petal. So this petal, the one that's typically centered, is known as the lip. And in almost all orchid species, it's a highly modified, specialized structure, usually for specific to their pollination. So another way that orchids differ from a lot of other, what you would typically consider more normal flowers, is their male and female reproductive parts are on the same structure. And so if you take a look at a lily, for example, you have stamens with pollen grains on them, so that'd be the male part of the flower. And then in the center of the lily that sticks out, that's the stigma, which is where the pollen is deposited. And that would be the female portion of the flower. Orchids have something called a column, and on that column they have both the stigma and the anthers, or stamens. So they're called anthers in orchids. And instead of pollen dust orchids or pollen grains, orchids have this thing called pollinia, which are these little sticky sacs that are basically composed completely of pollen. And so I'm going to point out where it is on this flower for you. So the column actually is right there, the middle structure, and the anther cap is this little more golden yellow dot that this pointer is pointing at right now. And so that is what I will try to remove and deposit. And the stigma, let's see if I can get any closer. The stigma is usually behind the anther cap. Alright, behind the pollen. So let me see, this lip is hinged here. But if I'm correct, I'm not actually 100% sure, but the stigma is usually somewhere around here. And so that's where I'll try to deposit the pollen after I remove it. So I guess let's get into that. Okay, so filming the pendant flower and trying to manipulate things with my hand turned out to be difficult. So this one is one in a pot right now. And so let me just turn around over here. Okay, so I'm doing this through a screen, so this might take a little time. But actually, this is more clear. You can more clearly see the floral parts. I'll point them out again. So you have sepal 1, sepal 2, and then this is called, up here, this is the dorsal sepal, dorsal referring to the top. And then you have, whoa, okay. You have the lip, or the petal, one of the petals. You have one of these petals here, another petal here, and it flanks the column, which is this structure here, which has the stigma, which is back there somewhere, and then the pollinia, or pollen, which is this golden yellow thing right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove this. With this, so it should stick to this. If it doesn't stick to this, I will do it on another flower and try again. See how it's coming off? And of course it didn't stick to it. I'm gonna try to find it. So, of course I dropped that first pollen, so it's nowhere to be found now. It's probably somewhere on the floor of the tent. However, I took one off of another flower, and I'm just showing it to you here. It's that little yellow, there's 2 yellow sacs attached to the tip of this. And so basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this, and I'm going to deposit it slightly behind where I took pollen from, except on a different flower. So I'm going to try and film that again. Alright, so I'm going to try and place it behind the pollen. And so, doing this on the video is really tough. Okay. So, I'm gonna just go in. Push the lip down. And so, I don't know if that was caught on camera, but dang, probably not. But the stigma is very, very sticky for pollen. And so, even though the pollen is sticking to this little metal thing I have, once the pollen grains contact the stigma, they should stick to the stigma, and that's kind of how you know you got the stigma. And anyways, now I'm going to take the pollen from this guy. Maybe I caught that on camera. But anyways, so this pollen looks really white, and that's because it has something called an anther cap on it. And that anther cap needs to be removed to expose the golden yellow pollinia. And so what I do typically is I put it onto my hand. Let's see if I can change this around. It's focusing. There we go. You see it there in the, I guess that's the bottom of the screen. But I put it on my hand, and then what I do is I'll just like tap it with this to try and remove the anther cap. You see there? I have the anther cap here, and that little yellow part right there on my hand still is the pollinia. So I'll just discard the anther cap, and I'll pick up the pollinia. Try and grab it. My goodness. There we go. Okay. My camera is freaking out, but believe me that I have the pollinia on this metal thing. So now, I'm going to take it to one of these flowers over here. And so, you typically, I think, want to get younger flowers, but, so this top one here is the youngest flower, so I'm going to try to pollinate that one. But, again, probably no harm in using an older flower. But so, I'll take this and I will deposit it on the stigma again. So I think I might have just dropped the pollen. I'm gonna find it. But anyways, same thing I did on the other flower. You want to try and put it on the stigma there and it should stick. Okay, crisis averted. I was able to find the pollen. It was stuck on the lip and I just kind of nudged it up. But anyways, so that's basically it for pollination. I'll just show this one in the frame. And so what I will do now is you just have to wait for it to develop. I think typically Massivolias take around 90 days for a seed capsule to mature. However, what you want to start looking for signs of color change. So let me show you this capsule again. This one I did here quite a while ago. You can see it's still very green, but what will happen is the segments, it's kind of segmented. The segments that are what's the word? Depressed, those will start to go beige or white in color when the seed pod is ready to harvest, and that's kind of the optimal time to collect the seed. Another thing you can do, it's less recommended, but you can kind of look up in Google or just on Google, hey, this genus / species, how long does the seed pod take to mature? And so you'll get a bunch of answers from that. Some probably more accurate than others, but the best way to do it is to just do it by feel, because everyone has different growing conditions and seed pods will mature at different rates. Anyways, I hope you find this video helpful and you'll join me on this journey to propagate orchids from seed in your own home. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a future video.